the song that changed everything. The afternoon sun filtered through the lace curtains of the Victorian house on Maple Street, casting gentle shadows across the hardwood floor. Sarah Mitchell adjusted the pillows behind elderly Mr. Harrison's back and smoothed the worn quilt over his lap. At 78, William Harrison had become as fragile as autumn leaves, his once strong frame now bent with age and illness. Sarah had been his caregiver for nearly 2 years now. She was 26, with kind brown eyes and calloused hands that spoke of honest work. Her nursing degree hung proudly in her small apartment across town, though the job market had been cruel to new graduates. This position with Mr. Harrison barely covered her student loans and rent, but she had grown genuinely fond of the gentle old man. "How are we feeling today, Mr. Harrison?" Sarah asked, checking his pulse with practiced efficiency. His wrist felt paper-thin beneath her fingers. "Oh, you know," he wheezed softly, his pale blue eyes twinkling despite his weakness. "Some days are diamonds, some days are stones. Today feels like a smooth river stone." Sarah smiled. Even in his declining health, William Harrison maintained his poetic way of speaking. He had been a literature professor before retirement, and his love for beautiful words had never faded. She had learned to treasure these quiet conversations during the long hours of his care. The house around them whispered of better times. Family. Photographs lined the mantelpiece, showing a younger William with his late wife Margaret and their son David. The furniture was elegant but worn, the wallpaper faded but clean. Sarah had noticed the unpaid bills stacked on the kitchen counter, the way Mr. Harrison's eyes lingered on them with worry. "Sarah, my dear," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "would you mind terribly if I shared something with you?" "Of course, Mr. Harrison. What's on your mind?" He gestured weakly toward a wooden box on the nearby bookshelf. "In that box are some letters from David, my son. We haven't spoken in, must be 15 years now." Sarah had wondered about David Harrison. She had seen him in the photographs, a serious-looking man in expensive suits, shaking hands with important people at what appeared to be business functions. But in all her time caring for Mr. Harrison, David had never visited, never called. "We had a terrible argument," Mr. Harrison continued, his eyes growing distant. "I thought his business practices were questionable. He thought I was a foolish old academic who didn't understand the real world. We both said things, harsh things that cut deep." Sarah pulled a chair closer to his bedside. This was the most he had ever spoken about his son. "He became very successful," Mr. Harrison said with a mixture of pride and sadness. "Made millions in real estate development. But somewhere along the way, we lost each other." The room fell quiet, except for the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Sarah could see the weight of regret in the old man's expression, the way his fingers fidgeted with the edge of his blanket. "He doesn't even know how sick I am," Mr. Harrison whispered. "Doesn't know that the medical bills have eaten through everything Margaret and I saved. Doesn't know that I might lose this house, our family home." Sarah felt her heart break a little more. She had suspected the family's financial struggles, but hearing it confirmed made everything more real, more urgent. "Would you like me to help you reach out to him?" she offered gently. Mr. Harrison shook his head slowly. "Pride is a stubborn thing, Sarah. It builds walls that seem impossible to tear down." As the afternoon wore on, Sarah went about her duties with extra care. She helped Mr. Harrison with his medication, prepared his dinner, and made sure he was comfortable. But she could sense his melancholy, the way it seemed to settle over him like a heavy blanket. Evening approached, painting the room in shades of gold and amber. Mr. Harrison had dozed off in his chair, his breathing shallow but steady. Sarah had finished the dishes and was preparing to help him to bed when she noticed him stirring restlessly. "Bad dreams?" she asked softly. "Memories," he replied, I keep thinking about when David was small. Margaret used to sing him to sleep with old folk songs. He had such a sweet voice then. An idea began to form in Sarah's mind. Her grandmother had taught her many of the same folk songs that mothers had sung for generations. Perhaps music might bring Mr. Harrison some peace. "Would you like me to sing something?" she asked hesitantly. "I'm not professionally trained, but I know some of those old songs." Mr. Harrison's eyes brightened for the first time all day. "Would you really? That would be wonderful." Sarah pulled her chair closer and took his frail hand in hers. She thought for a moment, then began to sing in a soft, clear voice. "In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore." Her voice filled the quiet room like warm honey, gentle and soothing. Mr. Harrison's eyes closed, but she could see the tension leaving his face, his breathing becoming more peaceful. "There's a land that is fairer than day, and by faith we can see it afar." What Sarah didn't know was that David Harrison was standing in the hallway just outside the living room door. He had driven 3 hours from the city, wrestling with his conscience the entire way. His private investigator's report about his father's condition lay on the passenger seat of his Mercedes, pages that had shattered his stubborn pride with their clinical details. Terminal diagnosis, mounting medical debt, house in foreclosure proceedings. David had arrived intending to have a brief awkward conversation, perhaps arrange for better care, write a check, maintain his distance while easing his guilt. But hearing Sarah's gentle voice singing his mother's favorite hymn had stopped him cold. Through the doorway, he could see his father's face transformed by peace, could see the young woman holding his hand with such tenderness. This wasn't the hired help he had imagined. This was someone who genuinely cared for William Harrison as a human being, not just a client. "We shall sing on that beautiful shore, the melodious songs of the blessed." David's eyes filled with unexpected tears. He remembered his mother singing. Those same words, remembered his father reading him bedtime stories in that same gentle voice. When had he become so hardened that he had forgotten these simple, precious things? As the song ended, David watched Sarah adjust his father's blanket and whisper something that made the old man smile. The love and respect in her actions spoke louder than any professional credentials could. David stepped back into the hallway, pulling out his phone. He had calls to make, to his lawyer about the foreclosure, to his accountant about his father's medical expenses, to the best specialists money could hire. But first, he needed to find his courage. The next morning, Sarah arrived for her usual shift to find an expensive car in the driveway. Her heart raced, wondering if something had happened to Mr. Harrison during the night. She found them in the living room, father and son sitting together, both with tears in their eyes. 15 years of silence was melting away like snow in spring sunshine. "Sarah," Mr. Harrison called out when he saw her, his voice stronger than it had been in months. "I'd like you to meet my son, David." David Harrison stood, and Sarah was surprised by his warm smile, so different from the stern business photos she had seen. "Ms. Mitchell, I understand I have you to thank for taking such extraordinary care of my father." "I was just doing my job," Sarah said modestly. "No," David said firmly. "You were doing much more than that. You were giving him love, dignity, and comfort. That's not something you can put a price on." Over the following weeks, everything changed. David moved his father to a beautiful private care facility where Sarah was hired as his personal nurse, with a salary that finally matched her education and dedication. The house on Maple Street was saved, restored to its former glory as the family home it was meant to be. But more importantly, father and son had found their way back to each other. David visited daily, and slowly, carefully, they rebuilt their relationship one conversation at a time. 6 months later, at Mr. Harrison's 80th birthday party, Sarah watched as David helped his father cut the cake. The old man's health had stabilized, surrounded by love and proper medical care. "You know what changed everything?" Mr. Harrison told the gathered friends and family, his voice carrying clearly across the room. It was a song, a simple, beautiful song sung by someone with a heart full of grace. He looked directly at Sarah, his eyes twinkling with that familiar warmth. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest miracles. Sarah smiled, thinking about how her grandmother's old folk songs had somehow managed to heal a family and change her own life forever. Music, she realized, truly was a universal language, one that could bridge any gap, soften any heart, and remind people of what really mattered. As the evening wound down, David approached her with a grateful smile. "Thank you, Sarah, for everything. For seeing past an old man's pride to his heart, for caring when no one was watching." "Someone was always watching," Sarah replied gently, glancing upward with a smile. "Someone was always watching."